Flight on Titan by Stanley Weinbaum. Chapter 1. The gale roared incessantly like all the tormented souls since creation's dawn, driving the two sliding and tumbling into the momentary shelter of a ridge of ice. A cloud of glittering ice needles swept by, rainbow-hued in the brilliant night, and the chill of 80 below zero bit through the sponge rubber of their suits. The girl placed her visor close against the man's helmet and said steadily,
"This is the end, isn't it, Tim? Because I'm glad I came with you then. I'm glad it's both of us together."
The man groaned despairingly, and the blast tore the sound away. He turned aside, thinking regretfully of the past. The year 2142, as most people will recall, was a disastrous one in the financial world. It was the year of the collapse of the Planetary Trading Corporation, and the year that ushered in the resultant depression. Most of us remember the hysterical 2 years of speculation that preceded the crash. These followed the final development of the Hawken rocket in 2030, the annexation of the arid and useless moon by Russia, and the discovery of the international expeditions of a dead civilization on Mars and a primitive one on Venus. It was the Venus report that led to the formation of the PTC and the debacle that followed. No one knows who is to blame. All the members of those intrepid expeditions have suffered under the cloud. 2 of them were murdered in Paris only a little more than a year ago, presumably by vengeful investors in Planetary. Gold will do such things to men. They will take mad risks with what they have, pursuing a vision of what they hope to have, and when the crash comes, turn on any scapegoat that's luckless enough to be handy. At any rate, regardless of responsibility, the rumor started that gold was as common on Venus as iron on Earth, and then the damage was done. No one stopped to reflect that the planet's density is less than the Earth's, and that gold, or any heavy metal, should be even rarer there, if not utterly absent, as on the moon. The rumors spread like an epidemic, and stories circulated that the expedition members had returned wealthy. All one had to do, it seemed, was to trade beads and jackknives to the obliging Venusian natives for golden cups, golden axes, golden ornaments. The shares of the quickly organized Planetary Trading Corporation skyrocketed from a par of 50 to a peak of 1,300. Vast paper fortunes were made. The civilized world went into a frenzy of speculative fervor. Prices of everything shot upward in anticipation of a flood of new gold, food, rent, clothing, machinery. We all remember the outcome. Planetary's first 2 trading expeditions looked long and arduously for the gold. They found the natives. They found them eager enough for beads and jackknives, but they found them quite destitute of gold. They brought back neat little carvings and a quantity of silver, scientifically valuable records, and a handful of pearl-like stones from Venusian seas, but no gold. Nothing to pay dividends to the avid stockholders, nothing to support the rumor-puffed structure of prices, which crashed as quickly as the shares of Planetary once the truth was out. The collapse affected investors and non-investors alike, and among them Timothy Vick and his Canadian wife Diane. The spring of 2142 found them staring at each other in their New York apartment, all but penniless, and in the very depths of despair. Jobs were vanishing, and Tim's training as a salesman of vision sets was utterly useless in a world where nobody could afford to buy them. So they sat and stared hopelessly, and said very little. Tim at last broke the gloomy silence. "Di," he said, "what'll we do when it's all gone?"
"Our money? Tim, something will come before then. It has to."
"But if it doesn't?" at her silence, he continued, "I'm not going to sit and wait. I'm going to do something."
"What, Tim? What is there to do?"
"I know." His voice dropped. "Di, do you remember that queer gem the government expedition brought back from Titan? The one Mrs. Advent paid $500,000 for, just so she could wear it to the opera?"
"I remember the story, Tim. I never heard of Titan."
"One of Saturn's moons. United States possession. There's a confirmatory settlement on it. It's habitable."
"Oh," she said, puzzled. "But what about it?"
"Just this. Last year, 6 traders went up there after more. One of 'em returned today with 5 of the things. I saw it on the news broadcast. He's rich, Di. Those things are almost priceless." Diane began to see.
"Tim," she said huskily, "yes, that's the idea. I'm going to leave you all I can, except what money I must have, and go up there for a year.
I've read up on Titan. I know what to take." He paused. "It's coming near Peregrine now. There'll be a rocket leaving for Nivea, that's the settlement, in a week."
"Tim," murmured Diane again. "Titan. Oh, I did hear of it. That's the cold one, isn't it?"
"Cold as Dante's hell," replied Tim. He saw her lips form a word of protest, and his blue eyes went narrow and stubborn. She changed her unspoken word.
"I'm going with you," she said.
Her brown eyes narrowed to meet his. Diane had won. That was over now. The long hours of argument, the final submission, the months of insufferably stuffy air aboard the rocket, the laborious struggle to erect the tiny hemispherical metal-walled shack that served as living quarters, the rocket had dropped them, cargo and all, at a point determined after a long conference back on Earth with Simmons, the returned trader. He had been an agreeable sort, but rather discouraging. His description of the Titan climate had sounded rather like a word picture of an Eskimo hell. He hadn't exaggerated, either. Tim realized that now, and cursed the weakness that had made him yield to Diane's insistence. Well, there they were. He was smoking his one permitted daily cigarette, and Diane was reading aloud from a history of the world, taken because it had some 1,000 pages and would last a long time. Outside was the unbelievable Titanian night, with its usual 100-mile gale screaming against the curved walls, and the glitter of ice mountains showing green under the glare of Saturn, with its rings visible edgewise from the satellite, since it revolved in the same plane. Beyond the mountains of the Damned, so named by Young, the discoverer, 100 miles away, lay Nivea, the city of snow. But they might as well have been on a planet of von Maunen's star, so far as human contact went. Surely no one could survive a cross-country journey here through nights that were generally 80 below zero, or even days that sometimes attained the balmy warmth of just above freezing. No, they were marooned here until the rocket returned next year. Tim shivered as the grinding roar of a shifting mountain sounded above the scream of the wind. That was common enough here. They were always shifting under the enormous tidal pull of the giant Saturn and the thrust of that incredible wind. But it was disquieting none the less. It was an ever-present danger to their little dwelling. "Brrr!" he shuddered. "Listen to that!" Diane looked up.
"Not used to it yet, after 3 months."
"And never will be," he returned. "What a place!" She smiled.
"I know what'll cheer you,"
she said, rising. From a tin box she poured a cascade of fire.
"Look, Tim, 6 of them, 6 flame orchids."
He gazed at the glowing eggs of light. Like the flush of life itself, rainbow rings rolled in 100 tints beneath their surfaces. Diane passed her hand above them, and they responded to its warmth with the flame of changing colors that swept the entire keyboard of the spectrum, reds merging into blues, violets, greens, and yellows, then orange and scarlet of blood.
"They're beautiful," Tim whispered, staring fascinated. "No wonder rich women bleed themselves dry for them. Diane, we'll save one out, the prettiest, for you." She laughed. "There are things I'd rather have, Tim."
A pounding sounded above the windy bellowing. They knew what it meant. Tim rose and peered through the reinforced window into the brilliant night, and, after a moment of blinking, made out the 4-foot-long body of a native sprawled before his door, his coned claws hooked onto the ice. On Titan, of course, no creature stood erect against those perpetual howling blasts, no creature, that is, save man, a recent arrival from a gentler world. Tim opened the door, slipping it wider notch by notch on its retaining chain, since muscular power would have been inadequate to hold it. The wind bellowed gleefully in, sweeping the hanging utensils on the walls into a clanging chorus, spinning a loose garment into a mad dance, chilling the air to bitterness. The native slithered through like a walrus, his streamlined body sea-like and glistening with its 2-inch protective layer of blubbery flesh. As Tim cranked the door shut, the creature raised the filmy underlids from its eyes, and they showed large, luminous, and dog-like. This was a Titanian native, not much more intelligent than a St. Bernard dog, perhaps, but peaceable and inoffensive, beautifully adapted to its forbidding environment, and the highest form of life yet known on Titan. He reached into the pouch opening on his rubbery back. "Ugh!" he said, displaying a white ovoid. As the comparatively warm air of the room struck it, the flame orchid began to glow in exquisite colors. Diane took it. Against her palms, the tints changed more quickly, deepened gloriously. It was a small one, no larger than a robin's egg, but perfect, except where it had been attached to some frigid rock.
"Oh," she exclaimed, "what a beauty, Tim!"
He grinned. "That's no way to bargain." He pulled out the black case that contained their trade goods, opening it to display the little mirrors, knives, beads, matches, and nondescript trinkets. The coal-black eyes of the native glittered avidly. He glanced from one article to the next in an agony of longing indecision. He touched them with his clawed, 3-fingered hands. He cooed huskily. His eyes wandered over the room. "Huss!" he said abruptly, pointing. Diane burst into a sudden laugh. He was indicating an old and battered 8-day clock, quite useless to the pair, since it lacked the adjustment to permit them to keep other than Earth time. The ticking must have attracted him.
"Oh, no," she chuckled. "It's no good to you. Here."
She indicated a box of trinkets. "Ooga! Whoosh!" The native was insistent.
"Here, then."
She passed him the clock. He held it close to his skin-shielded ears and listened. He cooed. Impulsively, Diane picked a pocket-knife from the box.
"Here," she said. "I won't cheat you. Take this, too."
The native gurgled. He pried open the glittering blade with his hooked claws, closed it, and slipped it carefully into his back pouch, stuffing the clock after it. The pouch stood out like a miniature hump as he turned and scuttled toward the door. "Oh!" he said. Tim let him out, watching through the window as he slipped across the slope, his blunt nose pointed into the wind as he moved sideways. Tim faced Diane. "Extravagance!" he grinned.
"Oh, a 50-cent knife for this."
She fondled the gem. 50 cents back home," he reminded her. "Just remember what we paid for freight, and you'll see what I mean. Why, look at Nivea. They mine gold there, pure virgin gold, right out of the rocks. And by the time the cost of shipping it back to Earth is deducted, and the insurance, it barely pays. Just barely."
"Gold?"
"Yes, that's simple to understand. You know how little freight a rocket can carry when it has to be fueled and provisioned for a flight from Earth to Titan, or vice versa. A mere jaunt of 780 million miles, and plenty of chance for trouble on the way. I think the insurance on the gold is 30% of the value."
"Tim, shall we have insurance on these? How shall we ever manage?"
"We won't. We won't insure these, because we'll be going with them."
"But if they're lost?"
"If they're lost, Diane, insurance wouldn't help us, because then we'll be lost too."